Was this their exact exchange? Almost certainly not. Still, it is my best memory of their exchange. We finished school, promised lifelong friendship, and went our separate ways. Adrian, to nobody's surprise, won a scholarship to Cambridge. I read history at Bristol, Colin went to Sussex, and Alex into his father's business. We wrote letters to one another, as people, even the young, did in those days. But we had little experience of the form, so an arch self-consciousness often preceded any urgency of content. To start a letter, "Being in receipt of your epistle of the 17th inst," seemed for some while quite witty. We swore to meet every time the three of us at university came home for the vacation, yet it didn't always work out, and writing to one another seemed to have recalibrated the dynamics of our relationship. The original three wrote less often and less enthusiastically to one another than we did to Adrian. We wanted his attention, his approval. We courted him, and told him our best stories first. We each thought we were, and deserved to be, closest to him. And though we were making new friends ourselves, we were somehow persuaded that Adrian wasn't, that we three were still his nearest intimates, that he depended on us. Was this just to disguise the fact that we were dependent on him? And then life took over, and time speeded up. In other words, I found a girlfriend. Of course, I'd met a few girls before, but either their self-assurance made me feel gauche or their nervousness compounded my own. There was apparently some secret masculine code handed down from suave 20-year-olds to tremulous 18-year-olds, which, once mastered, enabled you to pick up girls and, in certain circumstances, get off with them. But I never learned or understood it, and probably still don't. My technique consisted in not having a technique. Others, no doubt rightly, considered it ineptitude. Even the supposedly simple trail of "like a drink, fancy a dance, walk you home, how about a coffee?" involved a bravado I was incapable of. I just hung around and tried to make interesting remarks while expecting to mess things up. I remember feeling sad through drink at a party in my first term, and when a passing girl asked sympathetically if I was okay, I found myself replying, "I think I'm a manic depressive," because at the time it felt more characterful than "I'm feeling a bit sad." When she replied, "Not another," and moved swiftly on, I realized that, far from making myself stand out from the cheery crowd, I had attempted the world's worst pickup line. My girlfriend was called Veronica Mary Elizabeth Ford, information, by which I mean her middle names, it took me 2 months to extract. She was reading Spanish, she liked poetry, and her father was a civil servant. About 5'2", with rounded muscular calves, mid-brown hair to her shoulders, blue-grey eyes behind blue-framed spectacles, and a quick yet withholding smile. I thought she was nice. Well, I probably would have found any girl who didn't shy away from me nice. I didn't try telling her I felt sad because I didn't. She owned a black box record player to my dansette, and had better musical taste. That's to say, she despised Dvorak and Tchaikovsky, whom I adored, and owned some choral and lieder LPs. She looked through my record collection with an occasional flickering smile and a more frequent frown. The fact that I'd hidden both the 1812 overture and the soundtrack to Un homme et une femme didn't spare me. There was enough dubious material even before she reached my extensive pop section. Elvis, the Beatles, the Stones, not that anyone could object to them, surely, but also the Hollies, the Animals, the Moody Blues, and a 2-disc box set of Donovan called, in lower case, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden. "You like this stuff?" she asked neutrally. "Good to dance to," I replied a little defensively. "Do you dance to it? Here? In your room? By yourself?" "No, not really, though of course I did." "I don't dance," she said, part anthropologist, part layer down of rules for any relationship we might have, were we to go out together. I better explain what the concept of going out with someone meant back then, because time has changed it. I was talking recently to a woman friend whose daughter had come to her in a state of distress. She was in her second term at university, and had been sleeping with a boy who had openly, and to her knowledge, been sleeping with several other girls at the same time. What he was doing was auditioning them all before deciding which to go out with. The daughter was upset, not so much by the system, though she half perceived its injustice, as by the fact that she hadn't been the one finally chosen. This made me feel like a survivor from some antique bypassed culture whose members were still using carved turnips as a form of monetary exchange. Back in my day, though I didn't claim ownership of it at the time, still less do I now, this is what used to happen. You met a girl, you were attracted to her, you tried to ingratiate yourself. You would invite her to a couple of social events, for instance, the pub, then ask her out on her own. Then again, and after a goodnight kiss of variable heat, you were somehow, officially, going out with her. Only when you were semi-publicly committed did you discover what her sexual policy might be, and sometimes this meant her body would be as tightly guarded as a fisheries exclusion zone. Veronica wasn't very different from other girls of the time. They were physically comfortable with you, took your arm in public, kissed you until the colour rose, and might consciously press their breasts against you as long as there were about 5 layers of clothing between flesh and flesh. They would be perfectly aware of what was going on in your trousers without ever mentioning it. And that was all, for quite a while. Some girls allowed more. You heard of those who went in for mutual masturbation, others who permitted full sex, as it was known. You couldn't appreciate the gravity of that full unless you had a lot of the half-empty kind, and then, as the relationship continued, there were certain implicit trade-offs, some based on whim, others on promise and commitment, up to what the poet called a wrangle for a ring. Subsequent generations might be inclined to put all this down to religion or prudery, but the girls, or women, with whom I had what might be called infrasex, yes, it wasn't only Veronica, were at ease with their bodies, and if certain criteria obtained, with mine. I don't mean to suggest, by the way, that infrasex was unexciting or even, except in the obvious way, frustrating. Besides, these girls were allowing far more than their mothers had, and I was getting far more than my father had done. At least, so I presumed. And anything was better than nothing. Except that in the meantime Colin and Alex had fixed themselves up with girlfriends who didn't have any exclusion zone policies, or so their hints implied. But then no one told the whole truth about sex, and in that respect nothing has changed. I wasn't exactly a virgin, just in case you were wondering. Between school and university I had a couple of instructive episodes whose excitements were greater than the mark they left. So what happened subsequently made me feel all the odder. The more you liked a girl, and the better matched you were, the less your chance of sex, it seemed. Unless, of course, and this is a thought I didn't articulate until later, something in me was attracted to women who said no. But can such a perverse instinct exist? Why not, you would ask, as a restraining hand was clamped to your wrist. It doesn't feel right. This was an exchange heard in front of many a breathy gas fire, counterpointed by many a whistling kettle. And there was no arguing against feelings, because women were experts in them, men coarse beginners. So, it doesn't feel right, had far more persuasive force and irrefutability than any appeal to church doctrine or a mother's advice. You may say, but wasn't this the 60s? Yes, but only for some people, only in certain parts of the country.